Good morning, everyone. This is Greg Aden for another episode of Servant Leadership Podcast. And this morning, I have the pleasure of introducing, some of you know him already, Mr. Jeff Patterson. He resides in Aspen, Colorado, has a beautiful consulting firm out there called Aspen Success Coaching. But more importantly, he just wrote a book. And I believe I'm going to hear a lot about this book because I knew about this book way back when, but it's called The Big Thing Effect. And how you pick that title, I'm dying to ask you. But I want to say hello to you, Jeff, and wish you well. And just give us a quick background of who you are, Mr. Patterson, where you came from, other than Nebraska and Santa Monica. But where is your heart right now? Where are you coming from?
Well, I'm coming from just being on the phone with somebody that just had surgery, saying a little prayer with them, honestly.
Ah,
That's definitely something I'm present to as I start the call, thinking it was an unexpected surgery for a dear friend of mine, past client, actually. So my heart is a little bit tender because of that, but also very open. And I'm thrilled to see you, Greg. We
yeah,
spent time on Aconcagua and your training together. I got to know you and your incredible, spirit of helping people. I share stories about you with clients and people. I think of one in particular when you and I and the team we were doing a training climb at the Grand Canyon. We were doing the rim to rim,
yeah.
and you had these new exotic technology things called walking sticks. I had no idea what those were. And I'm like, who needs walking sticks? Like that's ridiculous. What are we, old men? I think I was like pushing 40 at the time,
Yeah.
and I just was full of hubris, speaking of lack of humility. And I probably wasn't down the mountain 30 minutes. You're, down into the canyon 30 minutes when my IT van seized up, and I was in so much pain and I couldn't walk, as you remember. And you were kind enough to tell me that I should have brought my own, and you kept walking. No, you gave me one of your poles. You gave me one of your poles,
Yeah.
and I used it as a crutch for the full 22 hours or however long it took us to go all the way down and all the way up by, I think it was 6 p.m. that day.
Yeah.
And you have been all through our training, that we did for that trip. You were always there giving me a leg up. I remember being on Long's Peak and we got to the keyhole.
Yeah.
And as you remember, tragedy struck that day. A man fell off around the keyhole. We were all looking through the keyhole going, holy cow, we're actually going to go through this. And I
Mhm.
had a huge pack. And you said, hey, Patterson, your pack looks a little big. Do you want me to take that pack? You took my bigger pack. Let me take your smaller pack because you're taller and bigger guy than me. But still, you didn't have to
Yeah.
do that. And that touched my heart so much. And that's how I think of you, Greg, because at so
Mm.
many moments, you were so generous. You defined servant leadership. You demonstrated that through that entire time. And then of course your sense of humor and making games and rock ball and the fun things we would do at camp at night, you would instigate those things.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways you give is your incredible sense of humor. So as I enter this call with you, buddy, I'm just filled with so many good memories, so much appreciation for how you've contributed to my leadership, to my life, and the way I serve others.
Yeah, it's funny. I forgot about some of those. Certainly, Long's Peak was one of my favorites. It was my birthday. I was, I was a little scared too as we cruised through there and had to look down and see this gentleman being wrapped up who had fell the evening before. But I'll never forget that sound of the whoop 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 whoop. The helicopter coming in, and we all just looked and saw that 300-foot rope being connected to his basket. And that huddle that day when we all looked each other in the eye, and I'll remember a few of us shed some tears. Why are we really doing this? And we had to challenge our why in that moment because, yeah, it was a training climb, but is it really worth it? And that was one of my stronger days. And, not many people know this, but I honestly believe that evening later that night is when Brooks was conceived. So,
Mm. Well,
yeah, we should have called him Long's Peak. Anyway,
yeah.
And speaking of marriages and two little ones, Jeff, I always remember you as someone who brought up how important Lindsay was to you. The relationship, the trials, the tribulations, the efforts you were making to decide, frankly, and then you did. And I know your book speaks to the big thing effect, but you have had an opportunity in your life many times, and just since I've known you for 12 and a half years now, you've had a lot of opportunities to do the big thing and do the right thing. And so I want to start with you mentioned your heart, and I love your heart. You and I have always had so much fun together. You got my silly Polish wit, but so I look at you today, and I smile, and I think about all those times that we sweated and cried together and bled together, frankly. But it was Lindsay that was always top of mind for you. And tell me where you are today, and how has she been part of your beautiful journey as a leader and a man and a spirit.
We celebrated our 11th year marriage this year. And, you know, our commitment in our marriage is a commitment to grow and transform. That's one of the cornerstones. So any challenge we face, it's sort of like, there's going to be some growth in here somewhere. And
Mhm.
that's not always easy because we are challenged. We have two young kids. I mean, I say we're challenged. I meant to say we go through challenges like
Sure.
everybody else, but I think our willingness to use our upsets and frustrations that we may be experiencing together as a way to look inside ourselves as to what needs to be let go of, what needs to be learned, what needs to be healed.
Mm.
And that has been our guiding light and has helped us to go through some really, some tough times. But Lindsay is, she's she's the sun in my universe. She lights up the sky. She's an incredible mom. She's taught me more about love than, you know, I'll ever know. I mean, and
Mm.
through the real relational
Sure.
everyday being and the ups and downs of life. It's an incredible thing. And it's been challenging. It's been challenging. I don't want to speak for her. I'm sure it's probably more challenging for her than it has been for me.
Scoot over, Jeff. Let me tell you about my challenges with him. No,
Yeah, exactly.
it's funny. You said you've learned more about love from her than anyone else. And I've heard myself say the following probably 100 times in interviews and just conversations. I've learned more about leadership from being a father than I have from any certification or any class I've ever taken. And I hope you would agree then, as Brooklyn's now 5 and Emery's 8, you might agree too that parenting, although a gift, is a challenge and brings us life lessons, but it is very similar to leadership. Yes, how we
A-
how they're
Absolutely.
those
You
those
know,
two little followers is what I call them. Yeah,
well, I call them teachers, and I'm sure you probably would agree. They mirror everything. Any place where I'm triggered or challenged with my kids is a window into my past where
mm,
maybe I got stuck or struggled. So it's a chance to actually heal and clean up in me anything that I may be dragging along. So they're huge mirrors in that way, just like my marriage is. And that's how I choose to see everybody in my world, but
yep.
definitely how I see my kids or how I see our kids and how I see Lindsay and my marriage. When I'm struggling or challenged, that tells me to look in the mirror. This is in you. What's to learn? What's to heal here? And then when I clean that up, then it just, it frees me up in every other area. So everything's a teacher that way.
But this book has been in your noodle for a long time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, it has.
yeah, and great things don't just pop out. And there's folks that are, they write a book every 18 months, and God bless them, and somehow they're always New York bestsellers. I still haven't figured that out. But one guy that read your book said he dares you to let go of your real beliefs. And I love that quote, because do we really want to let go of what we believe has served us all these years, or do we really want to let go of our real belief? Tell me more about that, and why did this gentleman say that?
Well, the quote you're referring to, I think, is from Dr. Ron Holnick. Doctors
Yep.
Ron and Mary Holnick from the University of Santa Monica, teachers of mine, because I graduated from there years ago. He said, the book dares you to let go of the unreal beliefs that keep you locked into a relatively small game of life.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is what we do in life, and then there's who we're being.
Hmm.
And most of us spend time trying to change behavior, take action, and all of that is very important in life. But who we're being is the elixir. It is the magic.
Yep.
We just had Martin Luther King Junior Day yesterday, and he's such an inspiration to so many, and obviously to me too. Not just for what he did for our civil rights, for our country, for the world, but what inspires us about MLK is who he was, how committed he was, the love he demonstrated, who he was being.
Yep.
And so, this book, The Big Thing Effect, is really about the most important goal in your life at this time, your big thing.
Hmm.
And I give the 7 points to the checklist. But in the book, I give the 7 keys based on 20 years as a success coach of not only getting it done, but transforming your life to live the life you were born to live. The real motivator most people don't know how to work with is that way of being, which can be systematically altered with your mind.
Hmm.
And I talk a lot about that in the book about how I had to change. I literally changed who I was being, um, through going through Aconcagua and the training for that climb. And so, I think I trailed off on your question. I don't know that I answered it, Craig.
No,
But
no, no. You did fine, and I remember that you were one of five people that summited that day, and you were well behind, and you saw someone fall to their death, a very tragic death. If I remember, it was one of the two German
yes.
climbers, and so yeah, I can imagine that you look back at that. But you've always been talking about this topic. You've always been talking about kind of the what if. And, I guess I'm stuck on the letting go because if you wouldn't have let go of some limiting beliefs of who you were being or who you could be, you would have never made it to the top. You would have never made it through some of the training climbs if you had the T-band thing going on, the knee all the time, but you persevered, you pushed. And I'm not saying that you should go out and hurt yourself when you're already hurt, but you've obviously lived what you've written about. And I guess without going into the checklist, if there's a couple things about the book that you want our listeners to hear as to not only why they should care, but why they should read it and put into motion some of the things that you've lived through, Jeff.
Well, can I take a minute to hit a couple stories
Absolutely.
to maybe answer that?
Yep.
Because and thank you for bringing up, for reflecting back that, yeah, I've always been doing this. Since I was very young, I've always been interested in people and understanding what their dream is. And I didn't have special fancy coaching words, when I was a little kid, but I just like, what do you want to do? I was always angling, whether it was an adult or a friend, whether it was in college or whether it was in sales, or whether it was in music, or whether it was in Hollywood or was it in sales, it didn't matter. I was always wanting to know, what's your dream? What's the thing you want to do?
Yeah.
And it was on top of Aconcagua. It was actually Summit Day that you referred to. We've been on the mountain, I think, 14 days and nights. I'd had about 10 hours of sleep total altogether. I'd been battling altitude sickness, worried that it might be cerebral edema, and was on the edge and just inside hurricane. Now, I was applying these principles of mindset and all these things, but inside I was a hurricane and felt so alone, even though we had a team around us. And the team was going at a faster pace, and it's very important that the team keep their pace because they would get, they'd stop, they'd sweat, they'd get cold. That would not be a good thing. So they peeled off one guy, Rolo, with me, and the rest of the team surged ahead. But as they got farther and farther ahead, I got more and more defeated inside. And it's nobody's fault. Again, just my own mind and lack of sleep and
Yeah.
food, all of this stuff. And as we got farther and farther along, the team was about a mile ahead, and I was at the tricky part of the windy traverse. As you know, it's one of the most dangerous parts on Aconcagua. And there was a man in front of me, the German in a red suit, and he tripped and fell in front of me, and I watched him fall to his death. And all of a sudden, everything went silent. You know, the winds and the 30 below zero temperature, the snow, everything just all I could see was his body below. And as I stared at his lifeless body below, all I could think of was that was me. And I just imagined if my life ended today, had I done what I'd come here to do? Had I become who I was capable of being? And I knew the answer to that. And it was no. And right there, I was faced with the decision, do I move ahead or do I turn around? And I didn't just want to move ahead to climb a mountain. I wanted to move ahead and become the man I knew that I was capable of being,
Right.
to make the difference that I dreamed of making, to live my own dream. And that's when the big thing was born. I realized that I'd been kind of avoiding my big thing, which was really going for it as a coach and to write stories and books and get out and speak and share this message of a big thing with people. So it wasn't easy, but I ended up summiting and made it back down. And I decided that I'm not taking, I'm going to take his life as a tribute and this experience, never forget it, and never look back. And that's how the big thing was born. So to me, the purpose of this book is to share that experience. And I think many of us have had a similar experience, a close call, or something shakes up in our life, and we're like, you know what? What's this all for? And we don't have to wait for an experience like that.
Right.
We can decide today, and this book is that wake up call to encourage you to listen to the deep soul calling of your big thing, the thing that you know deep down you want to do that you may not feel ready for, but it's calling you. And if you say yes, it can change you in a way that no coach, no philosophy, no other person can. And the book is really ringing that bell of saying, hey, time is precious and there's something special in you and it's trying to get out. And if you bring it out, it'll change the game. It'll help you in your career. It'll help you in your relationship. Sometimes people's challenges is that they're avoiding that big
Yep.
thing.
Wow. I mean, lots to unpack here. And first of all, I want to recognize you as a man, a person, a vessel. You've always been curious. And you didn't use the word curious, but as you were leaning in, saying what you were doing and in all the roles in life, and from a young age, a young boy, I believe, Jeff, one of the things I love about you is your curiosity about what's going on in other people. And
Mm.
obviously you had the curiosity and the interest and the desire and frankly the commitment to find out what's really bubbling up inside of Jeff Patterson, and why do I still after all these years want to finish what I experienced on Aconcagua. And thank you for completing that. The other thing I hear too is you are asking people to take advantage of your experience, look inside themselves, deep inside themselves, and find out what story needs to come out. What is their big thing? And I want to ask you this because I believe for some of the people I know and coach and love, frankly, family members, I don't believe they believe in themselves enough. I don't believe they have a big thing. And they walk around with this, what does it matter? Why should I? Why should I care? And I know your book would help them. And who else is a perfect audience for your book? Is it someone that doesn't believe in themselves, or is it someone that does believe themselves, but they're not believing in the correct version of themselves? Again, I said a lot there. Answer whatever you
Yeah.
wish.
Well, I think there are three types this book really is in a sweet spot for.
Okay.
First of all, is high achievers, people that are hungry to be their best because there are 20 years of me coaching people at the highest echelons of life and business. And those principles are evident in the book, and my clients love this book because it really brings our coaching even to a deeper level, they say, which surprises me. I didn't never expected that. So people that are committed to being their absolute best,
Okay.
um, that is definitely a center bullseye for this book. Another ideal demographic for this book is people that have achieved, but like they sold the company or they retired or they hit a milestone and they're like, now what?
No, what? Right.
Everybody's got a big thing and there's always one brewing in us, but we got to slow down. And sometimes there's certain things that will help you to unpack it and uncover it. So people with a new chapter in front of them, this is a great book for new beginnings.
Okay.
And then the third tier is people that are stuck. And I've had this confirmed by so many people that got the book and said, "Oh my gosh, I've been stuck for several years." And this book, it just spoke to me. It woke up that thing inside of me. And you're right, I have a big thing. I'd been avoiding it, and I didn't even know I had one.
Hmm.
So those three things, I think, um, people will love it and have loved it. I mean, I've been writing this book. It took me 7 years, and I put it in front of all different types of people over the course of 7 years, and I really wanted it to hit those three demographics. And I wrote it so that it would awaken you. It's not really about me, although there's a lot of personal stories. A lot of my mistakes, I'm pretty vulnerable sharing in this book, even
Absolutely.
childhood. But it will illumine kind of your strength and have you get more in touch with yourself.
I'm smiling inside because even as a young child, you said that with so much vulnerability, but you almost needed to get permission for us to let go of our little child. And I we can talk all day about this, but we sometimes we compress our little child because we don't understand, we don't remember. But then when we start to remember who we were and how beautiful and simple and vulnerable and honest and go back to curious we were when we were that young boy or that young girl, that's when it was the purest. We were at our purest. Now, we may not be following people that were very kind and nice and all that. And again, don't know your story, but I will tell you that I have met many people who have looked back and said, "Gosh, I wish my parents would have." Well, now you can. And I believe, Jeff, the reason I equate parenting and leadership is because if we don't start parenting and leading differently in this country, nothing's going to change. Nothing is going to change if we continue to replay bad habits. Chris Everett gave you a strong remark. Speaking of high achievers, obviously she accomplished everything a woman tennis player could achieve, but she gives your book credit to helping her even be a better announcer and a better partner on the team she's playing in today. And kudos to you for that. And I'm going to ask you one last question because I believe that we all can see, visualize high achievers. Many of us have been high achievers, but I honestly believe that the people who are stuck could be millionaires who are stuck, people in bad marriages that are stuck, people who are in great jobs but don't like their boss stuck, and then there's just the general I don't know what the hell to do. So leave us with, if you're stuck, why should I care?
That's a loaded question for me as a coach because if someone's stuck, the thing I want to do most is listen.
Mm-hmm.
And no one needs to be convinced of anything. And I think most people that are stuck aren't hearing themselves
So
accurately. They're not seeing their power. They're not seeing their proficiency. There's a story running. They're telling themselves, failure is a story created
right.
in the mind. It doesn't even exist. It's just an idea that people. So, in my experience, most people that are stuck, if somebody comes to me stuck, I listen and I'm always blown away. I'm like, wait a minute, you did this, and you've withstood this, and you've brought this level of character, and you've been taking care of yourself, and you've got a sick mother that you're taking, and you're telling me you're stuck. Are you kidding me? Like,
Mm.
you're demonstrating such strength and care and vulnerability and leadership. Holy cow. Like, you need some self care.
Yeah.
And to see, so if there's anybody listening to this that feels stuck, it's likely because they're being hard on themselves. and they're falsely labeling all their hard work and all the character they're bringing. So, what I would say to somebody that's stuck is there's no mistake that you're listening to this now. And there is something in you that is leading you to step forward into something. And that something inside of you is what I would call your big thing.
Mhm.
But your big thing is more than just the goal that's trying to pull you forward. It's really your soul saying, I want to be more. There's more that I'm not. There's more that I'm withholding that I want to release and share in the world. And I want to bring it out. And sometimes people don't know how to bring it out, which is why I wrote this book. It is one of the simplest, most elegant routes to unlock your true power, and take a step toward why you're really here.
Jeff, thank you for holding up the name of the book, The Big Thing Effect. Jeff Patterson, Aspen Success Coaching. You know, and you talk about your ability to listen. In fact, on your website, you actually call yourself out as being known as a good listener. And I can tell you and tell anybody that's listening, pardon the pun, to this podcast, is that's one thing I loved about our relationship. You were you know, we had funny names for each other and things, but you were always curious. But if you're not listening, the questions mean nothing. If you're just asking questions to hear yourself talk and you're not truly listening. So I asked you to kind of close us up with the question, but I want to ask you, why do you believe listening is possibly one of the greatest powers we have as men and women?
It's the greatest way to observe the divine
Hmm.
because everything is divine. When I'm sitting with you, I'm talking to God. And if I'll open my eyes, I can witness it. And that, for whatever reason, is just baked into who I am and has been for a long time. There's nobody that I can't talk to and not see God and be grateful for the wisdom they're sharing with me. Everyone is my coach in that regard. But if I sit with you in 30 seconds, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. I see so much strength. But see, we get what we look for. And that's
Yeah,
what I'm looking for because that's what I love, because it affirms it in me. If I can't see anything in you that I don't know to be true about me, I can't see strength if I'm not willing to acknowledge strength within me.
yeah,
Which goes back to your point about parenting and marriage, is that we reparent ourselves by being there for others, and we don't have to have kids to do that. We can do that
sure.
through mentoring, through coaching, through service oriented things, which is why I believe in you and what you're up to with servant leadership so much. It's the
Yeah.
greatest way to heal is to give. We always have something to give.
I believe. I believe in that. And God bless you, Jeff Patterson. It's great to see you. For those of you listening, Jeff and I go way back to 2010. We've been in each other's lives, and in many ways, our paths have crossed several times. And I want this to kind of maybe be our big thing together, and think about how I can help serve you and your audience. And you've already helped serve my audience by taking on this request to be on my podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Patterson, again, appreciate you being here this morning. Give Lindsay a big hug for me and tell her I said hello. And I wish you and your family all the best, and keep cruising along on your big thing. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Greg. Pleasure. Thanks, bud.
You bet.